The gunshot echoed across the desolate plain as Mercy Sinclair clutched her newborn child tighter to her chest, her breath forming small clouds in the crisp dawn air. She had been running since nightfall, her boots worn and feet blistered, her once pristine dress now torn and stained with the dust of Colorado Territory, 1873. Behind her, the angry voices of Cherry Creek had faded, but their cruel words still rang in her ears. Devil's spawn. They had called her innocent baby boy. Mercy stumbled forward, her legs threatening to give way beneath her. The small bundle in her arms stirred, and she looked down at her son's face. Those eyes, those strange, mismatched eyes, one as blue as the summer sky, the other an amber gold that seemed to glow in the morning light. Heterochromia, the doctor had called it, but the townsfolk had another name for it. Witchcraft. "Hush now, little one," she whispered, though the baby wasn't crying. "We'll find somewhere safe." But safety seemed a distant dream as she surveyed the vast, unforgiving landscape stretching before her. She had been a respected schoolteacher in Cherry Creek, Colorado, widowed when her husband Daniel died in a mining accident just 3 months before their child was born. The town had supported her through her grief, or so she thought, until the moment the midwife had gasped in horror at the sight of her newborn's eyes. Word spread faster than wildfire, and before nightfall, Reverend Holloway was at her door with half the town behind him. Speaking of devils and witches' marks, Mercy pressed on, following the faint trail that led westward. Her milk would dry up soon if she couldn't find food and rest, and then what would become of her son? She had named him William after her father, though she had told no one in town. Now she wondered if he would live long enough to answer to his name. The sun climbed higher in the sky, beating down mercilessly. Mercy's parched throat ached, and her vision began to blur. In the distance, a dust cloud rose above the horizon. Riders, perhaps? Would they be friend or foe? She had no strength left to run, nowhere to hide in this barren stretch of land. "Lord, protect us," she murmured, sinking to her knees as the riders drew closer. The baby whimpered, sensing his mother's distress. "Shoo, William, it's all right." But it wasn't all right, and they both knew it. The thunder of hooves grew louder, and Mercy closed her eyes, bracing herself for whatever fate awaited them. When she opened them again, a tall figure on horseback loomed over her, silhouetted against the sun. She couldn't make out his features, only the outline of a broad-brimmed hat and the glint of what might be a star on his chest. "Madam!" The voice was deep, tinged with concern. "Are you hurt? Please," she whispered, her voice cracking. "My baby. They'll kill him if they find us." The man dismounted in one fluid motion, crouching beside her. Now she could see him clearly, sun-bronzed skin, eyes the color of faded denim, and a jawline shadowed with stubble. His clothes were trail-worn but clean, and the badge on his vest confirmed her earlier suspicion. A lawman of some kind. "I'm Yates Vaughn, deputy marshal out of Fort Collins," he said, offering her his canteen. "Who's trying to kill your child?" Mercy took a grateful sip of water before answering. "Cherry Creek. They say he's marked by the devil." She reluctantly tilted the bundle so he could see William's face. "Because of his eyes." The deputy's expression remained unchanged as he studied the infant's unusual gaze. Then, with a gentleness that seemed at odds with his weathered appearance, he reached out and brushed a finger along the baby's cheek. "Madam, I see only innocence in this child." His words, so simple, yet so profound, brought tears to Mercy's eyes. For days she had been alone, surrounded by hatred and fear, and now this stranger had offered the first kindness she had encountered since William's birth. "You're exhausted," he continued, rising to his feet. "My camp's not far from here. You and your boy need food and rest before you go any further." "You're not taking us back?" Deputy Vaughn shook his head. Not my jurisdiction. And even if it was, I wouldn't return a mother and child to people threatening them over something as natural as the color of eyes. He helped her to her feet, supporting her when she swayed from fatigue. Can you ride? Mercy nodded, though she wasn't entirely sure. It had been years since she'd been on horseback, and never in her current condition. But what choice did she have? The deputy lifted her onto his horse with surprising ease, then carefully handed William up to her before mounting behind her. His arms encircled her as he took the reins, creating a protective barrier that made Mercy feel secure for the first time in days. Hold on, he instructed. And then they were moving, the steady rhythm of the horse's gait lulling William back to sleep. Mercy fought against her own exhaustion, determined to stay alert. She didn't know this man, despite his badge and his kindness. In the West, a woman alone had to be cautious, especially one with a child deemed unnatural by so many. It's all right, the deputy said, as if reading her thoughts. You can rest. I'll make sure nothing happens to either of you. Perhaps it was foolish to trust him so quickly, but Mercy's body betrayed her, and she found herself leaning back against his solid chest, her eyes growing heavier by the moment. The last thing she remembered before drifting into sleep was the deputy's voice, low and reassuring, telling her that everything would be all right. When Mercy awoke, the sun was setting, casting long shadows across an unfamiliar landscape. She was lying on a bedroll beside a small campfire, William nestled securely beside her. For a moment, panic seized her. Where was she? Then memory returned, and she spotted Deputy Vaughn across the fire, stirring something in a cast-iron pot. You've been asleep for a few hours, he said without looking up. Your boy woke once, but I managed to calm him. He's got a strong grip for such a little fellow. He held up his hand, showing where the baby had apparently latched onto his finger. Thank you, Mercy said, sitting up carefully. Her body ached from days of running and sleeping on hard ground, but she felt stronger after rest and water. For everything, the deputy nodded, serving up a bowl of what appeared to be beans and bacon. It's not much, but it's hot. Mercy accepted the food gratefully, suddenly aware of how hungry she was. You didn't have to help us. Couldn't very well leave you out there to die, he replied matter-of-factly. What's your name? Mercy. Mercy Sinclair. And the little one? William. She hesitated, then added, My husband died before he was born. Mining accident. Deputy Vaughn's expression softened. I'm sorry to hear that, Mrs. Sinclair. Please call me Mercy. She took another spoonful of beans, appreciating the simple yet satisfying taste. What will happen now? That depends on where you're headed. Mercy stared into the fire. I don't know. I hadn't thought beyond getting away from Cherry Creek. The truth was, she had nowhere to go. Her parents were long dead, and she had no siblings or close friends outside of the town that had cast her out. The deputy considered this, his weathered face thoughtful in the firelight. There's a settlement about 2 days' ride from here. Timberlake, small but growing, might be a place for a fresh start. And if they react the same way to William? Timberlake's different. The folks there have come from all over, people looking for second chances. They tend not to ask too many questions about a person's past. He paused, adding more wood to the fire. Besides, they're in need of a schoolteacher. The last one left for California when gold fever struck. Mercy's heart quickened at the mention of teaching. It had been her passion, her purpose beyond being a wife. How do you know they need a teacher? I pass through regularly on my routes. Keep up with the news. He looked up at her. You are a teacher, aren't you? She blinked in surprise. How did you know? A slight smile touched his lips. The way you speak. The book in your bag, Shakespeare, isn't it? And your hands. He gestured toward her ink-stained fingers, a permanent mark of her profession. "You're very observant, deputy. Comes with the job." He poured himself a cup of coffee. "And it's Yates if we're using first names." William began to fuss, and Mercy gathered him into her arms. "He's hungry," she explained, feeling a flush rise to her cheeks. Yates immediately stood. "I'll give you privacy. Need to check on the horses anyway." As he disappeared into the gathering darkness, Mercy adjusted her clothing to feed her son. The baby's mismatched eyes gazed up at her, innocent and trusting. How could anyone see evil in this perfect little face? "We might have found a friend, William," she whispered. "Perhaps even a new home." When Yates returned, William was asleep again, and Mercy had composed herself. The deputy brought her a cup of coffee, which she accepted with a grateful smile. "If you don't mind me asking," he said, settling back onto his bedroll, "what exactly happened in Cherry Creek?" Mercy sighed, cradling the warm cup between her hands. "When William was born, the midwife saw his eyes and crossed herself. She told the reverend, who came to see for himself. He declared it a mark of Satan and said the child should be disposed of." Her voice broke on the last words. "When I refused, they turned against me too. Said I must have consorted with evil during my pregnancy. By nightfall, there was talk of purification by fire." Yates's expression hardened. "For a baby's eye color? Fear makes people cruel," Mercy said softly. "One of the town's children was born with a clubfoot last year. The family left soon after, though no one drove them out directly. There were whispers, though. And before that, a woman gave birth to twins who were joined at the arm. They didn't survive, but the mother was shunned anyway. Superstition has no place in civilized society," Yates muttered. "Is anywhere truly civilized out here?" Mercy asked, genuine curiosity in her voice. The deputy considered this. "Maybe not by Eastern standards, but there are good people in these territories, people trying to build something better than what they left behind." They fell into a companionable silence, broken only by the crackling of the fire and the distant howl of a coyote. Mercy found herself studying her rescuer's face in the flickering light. He was handsome in a rugged way, with lines around his eyes that spoke of both laughter and hardship. She guessed him to be in his early 30s, perhaps 5 or 6 years older than her own 25 years. "You should get some more rest," Yates eventually said. "We've got a long ride tomorrow if you want to reach Timberlake." "You're taking us there? Can't very well send you off alone, can I?" He added more wood to the fire. "I need to swing by there anyway. Part of my patrol route." Mercy wanted to thank him again, but feared she would start crying if she tried to speak. Instead, she nodded and settled back down beside William, pulling the blanket Yates had provided over them both. "I'll keep watch," the deputy assured her. "You're safe here." For the first time since William's birth, Mercy believed those words might actually be true. Dawn broke cold and clear over the Colorado landscape as Yates prepared coffee over the rekindled fire. Mercy awoke to find William already changed and swaddled in a clean piece of cloth. "Hope you don't mind," Yates said, noticing her confusion. "He was fussing, and you needed the sleep. You changed my baby?" The deputy's cheeks colored slightly beneath his tan. "Had 6 younger siblings. Helped raise most of them after our ma passed." This unexpected glimpse into his past made Mercy see him in a new light. Not just a lawman doing his duty, but a man who understood responsibility and care. "Thank you," she said simply. They broke camp efficiently, Mercy marveling at how quickly Yates packed everything onto his horse. When he lifted her onto the saddle again, his hands were strong but respectful, lingering no longer than necessary. "It's about 15 miles to Timberlake," he explained, mounting behind her. "Terrain's easier today, but we'll still need to make a stop or two for the baby." The day passed in a rhythm of riding and brief rests. Yates proved to be a surprisingly comfortable traveling companion, sharing stories of the territories he patrolled but never prying into Mercy's past beyond what she volunteered. By midday, she found herself telling him about her childhood in Ohio, her journey west with her parents, and her marriage to Daniel, a kind but unremarkable man whose primary virtue had been stability. "He was a good husband," she concluded, "if not a passionate one. I think he would have been a devoted father." "I'm sure he would," Yates agreed, his voice gentle. "Any man would be proud to have a son like William." The sincerity in his tone brought unexpected tears to Mercy's eyes. She blinked them away quickly, focusing on the horizon. "Tell me about Timberlake. What kind of place is it?" "Started as a trading post about 5 years back. Now there's a proper town general store, blacksmith, even a small church. No saloon yet, which keeps it quieter than most settlements its size. The mayor, Franklin Pierce, no relation to the president, has been trying to attract families. Says the future of the West depends on children and education." "And the people?" "Hard-working, mostly honest. Like I said, many are looking for fresh starts, so they don't tend to judge others too harshly." He adjusted his hat against the sun. "The preacher, Reverend Wilson, is a reasonable sort. More concerned with feeding the hungry than condemning sinners." This was reassuring, though Mercy still harbored doubts. One bad experience had been enough to make her wary of communities and their swift judgments. As the afternoon wore on, the landscape began to change, the barren plains giving way to more varied terrain with scattered pine trees and rocky outcroppings. By late afternoon, Mercy could make out smoke rising in the distant chimneys from the settlement. Yates confirmed. They crested a small ridge, and Timberlake spread out before them in the valley below. It was larger than Mercy had expected, with perhaps 24 buildings arranged along a main street and several side lanes. Unlike the hastily constructed towns she'd seen during her journey west, Timberlake had an air of permanence, with solid wooden structures and even a few brick buildings at its center. "What do you think?" Yates asked as they paused to survey the town. "It looks peaceful," Mercy replied, trying to ignore the flutter of anxiety in her stomach. Would they truly accept her and William here? "Mayor Pierce's house is the large one on the north end," Yates explained. "We'll go there first. He can direct you to lodgings and introduce you to the town council about the teaching position." As they rode down into Timberlake, Mercy straightened her posture despite her fatigue. First impressions mattered, especially for a woman in her situation. She was acutely aware of her bedraggled appearance, her once neat dress now travel-stained and wrinkled, her hair falling from its pins despite her attempts to tidy it that morning. People glanced up as they passed, curious about the newcomers but not openly hostile. A few nodded to Yates in recognition. Mercy held William close, instinctively shielding his face from view. The mayor's house was an impressive 2-story structure with a wide porch and actual glass windows, a sign of prosperity in these parts. A plump woman with gray-streaked hair was sweeping the porch as they approached. She looked up, squinting against the late afternoon sun. "Deputy Vaughn, didn't expect to see you back so soon." Her gaze shifted to Mercy and the bundle in her arms. "And who might this be?" "Mrs. Pierce," Yates greeted her, dismounting and helping Mercy down. "This is Mrs. Sinclair and her son William. They're in need of assistance." The woman's expression softened immediately. "Of course, come in, come in. Herbert is at the store, but he'll be home for supper soon." Inside, the house was comfortably furnished with a mix of frontier practicality and Eastern refinements, braided rugs over plank floors, a piano in one corner, and bookshelves lined with leather-bound volumes. Mrs. Pierce Beatrice, she insisted, ushered Mercy to a cushioned chair and fussed over William while Yates explained their situation in low tones. Mercy watched anxiously as Beatrice's expression changed from curiosity to concern. Would this be where they were turned away again? But when the older woman approached, her eyes were kind, not condemning. "May I see him properly?" she asked, gesturing to William. Heart pounding, Mercy adjusted the blanket covering her son, revealing his face and his distinctive eyes. Beatrice leaned closer, studying the baby's features. "Well," she said finally, "he's certainly going to break hearts with those eyes when he's older." Relief flooded through Mercy so intensely that she nearly wept. "You don't think it's unnatural?" Beatrice waved a dismissive hand. "My cousin back in Pennsylvania had something similar. One brown eye, one green. Smartest man in the family. Became a doctor." She straightened up. "Now, you both look exhausted. I'll show you to the guest room where you can freshen up before supper." As Beatrice led Mercy upstairs, she glanced back at Yates, who offered a reassuring nod. Perhaps Timberlake truly would be different. The guest room was small but clean, with a washstand already prepared with fresh water. Beatrice left Mercy with promises of clean clothes and a proper meal, closing the door softly behind her. Alone at last, Mercy laid William on the bed and sank down beside him, the events of the past days catching up to her. She had fled her home with nothing but the clothes on her back and her child in her arms. Now she was in a stranger's house in an unknown town, dependent on the kindness of people she'd just met. Yet for the first time since William's birth, she felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps here, in this place of second chances, they might find acceptance. And perhaps the deputy with the kind eyes and gentle hands might remain a friend to them in this new chapter of their lives. William gurgled, reaching up with tiny fingers, and Mercy smiled down at him. "We made it, little one. We made it." Downstairs, Yates was explaining to Herbert Pierce, who had returned from the store, the circumstances of Mercy's arrival in Timberlake. The mayor, a portly man with impressive side whiskers and a perpetually worried expression, listened intently. "Superstition and ignorance," he declared when Yates finished. "We'll have none of that here, Mrs. Sinclair sounds like exactly the sort of person we need teaching our children, educated, resilient, and clearly devoted to her child. The school position is still open." Then, Yates confirmed, "Indeed it is, and growing more urgent by the day. We have 27 children of school age now, and Mrs. Johnson can barely manage her own brood, let alone act as temporary teacher for the whole town." He puffed up importantly. "I'll call a meeting of the town council tomorrow to formally offer her the position." Yates nodded, relieved that Mercy and William would have a place here. "She'll need lodgings. The schoolhouse has that small attached room, doesn't it?" "It does, though it's quite basic. But with a salary, she could rent something better within a few months." The mayor glanced toward the stairs. "In the meantime, Beatrice will insist they stay here until proper arrangements can be made." When Mercy descended the stairs for supper, she had transformed. Wearing a borrowed dress of Beatrice's, hastily taken in at the waist, her hair neatly pinned, and her face freshly washed, she looked like the respectable schoolteacher she was rather than a desperate fugitive. William, too, was freshly diapered and wrapped in a clean blanket. Yates, who had washed up at the pump in the yard, felt his breath catch at the sight of her. In the chaos of their meeting and journey, he hadn't fully appreciated how lovely she was, not in the showy way of saloon girls, but with a quiet grace that seemed to illuminate her from within. Dinner was a simple but hearty affair of roast chicken, potatoes, and fresh bread. The conversation flowed easily, with Mayor Pierce asking about Mercy's teaching experience and educational background. To Yates's relief, no one mentioned William's eyes again, though both the Pierces doted on the infant, taking turns holding him while Mercy ate. "You really think the town will accept me as teacher?" Mercy asked as they finished dessert apple pie that reminded her painfully of home. Without question, the mayor assured her. We've been desperate for someone with your qualifications. And frankly, my dear, after hearing what you've endured, I believe you'll find Timberlake refreshingly tolerant. We're a young community, building from the ground up. No room for old superstitions here. Deputy Vaughn speaks highly of you, Beatrice added, glancing between Mercy and Yates with a knowing look that made both of them slightly uncomfortable. And we trust his judgment implicitly. After dinner, when William had been settled in a makeshift cradle fashioned from a drawer lined with blankets, the adults gathered in the parlor. Mayor Pierce outlined his plans for introducing Mercy to the town council and arranging for the schoolhouse to be prepared for her use. The term should start as soon as possible, he explained. The children have been without formal instruction since April. I could begin next Monday, Mercy offered. If that's not too soon, I'll need to assess their current knowledge and organize appropriate lessons. Excellent, excellent. The mayor beamed. Beatrice, we must introduce Mrs. Sinclair to Reverend Wilson tomorrow. He maintains the town's small library such as it is and can provide books for the school. As the evening wore on, Yates found himself growing increasingly quiet. His duty had been fulfilled. He had delivered Mercy and William safely to Timberlake and ensured they would be accepted. Tomorrow he should continue his patrol route. Yet the thought of riding away left him strangely unsettled. When Beatrice finally declared it was time to retire, Mercy turned to Yates. Will you be staying in town? For tonight, he replied. I usually take a room at Mrs. Holbrook's boarding house when I'm passing through. You're welcome to our sofa, Deputy, Mayor Pierce offered, but Yates declined politely. Best not to disrupt your household further. I'll head over to Mrs. Holbrook's. As he rose to leave, Mercy stepped forward. I don't know how to thank you properly for what you've done for us. No thanks necessary, Mrs. Sinclair. Just doing my duty. But they both knew it had been far more than duty that had prompted him to help a desperate woman and her newborn child. Will you come by tomorrow before you leave? She asked, her voice soft. Of course. He reached for his hat, nodding to the Pierces. Thank you for your hospitality. Outside, the night was cool and clear, stars scattered like diamond dust across the velvet sky. Yates stood on the porch for a moment, breathing in the pine-scented air. From inside came the muffled sounds of conversation as Beatrice continued to fuss over their guests. He should be pleased with the outcome, a good deed done, a mother and child safe. But as he walked toward Mrs. Holbrook's boarding house, he couldn't shake the feeling that something significant had changed in his life, something he wasn't quite ready to examine too closely. The following morning dawned bright and crisp, autumn's approach evident in the golden tinge to the leaves of the cottonwoods lining Timberlake's main street. Yates completed his official business early, checking in with the local constable, a former Army sergeant named Ellis who maintained what passed for law and order in the small settlement. Quiet as ever, Ellis reported. Had a dispute between Johnson and Miller over water rights last week, but they worked it out without gunplay. Any strangers passing through? Just the usual traders. And I hear you brought in a widow and her baby yesterday. That true? Yates nodded, not elaborating on the circumstances. Mrs. Sinclair may be taking over as schoolteacher. About time, Ellis grunted. My boy's starting to forget his letters with no proper teaching. By mid-morning, Yates had concluded his official business and found himself lingering in town longer than strictly necessary. He told himself it was just to ensure Mercy and William were settling in well, but in truth, he was reluctant to leave without seeing them again. He found Mercy at the schoolhouse, William sleeping peacefully in a basket beside her as she inspected the modest building. Mayor Pierce was with her, pointing out features with the pride of someone showing off a grand mansion rather than a simple one-room structure with rough-hewn desks and a pot-bellied stove. Deputy Vaughn, The mayor spotted him first. "Come see what you think of our educational establishment." Mercy turned, her face lighting up in a way that sent a curious warmth through Yates's chest. She was wearing another of Beatrice's altered dresses, this one a deep blue that complemented her fair complexion and brought out the rich brown of her eyes. "You came," she said, as if she had doubted he would. "Said I would." He approached, tipping his hat to her before glancing around the schoolhouse. "Looks solid enough." "It's wonderful," Mercy declared with genuine enthusiasm. "There's plenty of light from these windows, and Mr. Pierce says the town will provide slate boards for the children." She gestured to the small room at the back. "And there's even living quarters for me and William, though they're quite basic. Mrs. Pierce insists they stay with us until we can make the room more suitable," the mayor explained. "Just needs some cleaning and a few amenities, proper bed, cook stove, that sort of thing." Yates nodded approvingly. "Seems like you're in good hands." "Thanks to you," Mercy said softly. Mayor Pierce, displaying a tact Yates wouldn't have expected from the somewhat pompous man, cleared his throat. "I should check on Beatrice. She's gathering the town ladies to help prepare the room. Deputy, perhaps you could stay with Mrs. Sinclair while she finishes her inspection? Never know when a man's strength might be useful for moving things." With that transparent excuse, he bustled out, leaving them alone save for the sleeping infant. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Mercy asked, "When do you leave?" "Should be heading out soon. Got to make it to Johnson's Creek by nightfall." "Of course." She turned away, running her hand along one of the desks. "You have your duties." Yates moved closer, suddenly conscious of the creaking floorboards beneath his boots. "Mrs. Sinclair, Mercy, I want you to know that my patrol brings me through Timberlake regularly. Every few weeks or so." She looked up, hope flickering in her eyes. "Does it?" "It does. And I'd be remiss if I didn't check on you and William each time, to make sure you're settling in well." A small smile curved her lips. "That would be very thorough of you, Deputy." "Yates," he reminded her. "Yates?" she echoed, the name soft on her lips. William stirred in his basket, breaking the moment. Mercy immediately went to him, lifting the baby with practiced ease. The infant blinked up at them with his mismatched eyes, which seemed even more striking in the clear light streaming through the schoolhouse windows. Yates found himself stepping closer, drawn by some inexplicable pull. "May I?" he asked, holding out his arms. Mercy hesitated only briefly before transferring William to him. The baby felt impossibly small in his large hands, a fragile miracle of tiny fingers and soft skin. Those extraordinary eyes, one blue, one amber, gazed up at him with what Yates fancied was recognition. "He remembers you," Mercy said, watching them. "Probably just wondering who this stranger is," Yates replied, though secretly pleased by the thought. "He's a fine boy, Mercy. Any father would be proud." Her expression softened. "I think Daniel would have been, though he might have struggled with the town's reaction, as I did." "Their loss," Yates said firmly, "and Timberlake's gain." William made a small, contented sound, his tiny hand gripping Yates's finger with surprising strength. Something tightened in the deputy's chest, an unfamiliar ache that was equal parts sweet and painful. "I should go," he said reluctantly, handing the baby back to Mercy. "Daylight's burning." She nodded, understanding the practicalities of frontier life. "Thank you again. For everything." Yates reached into his pocket and withdrew a small piece of paper. "This is my route for the next few months. The dates I'll be passing through Timberlake are marked." He hesitated, then added, "In case you need anything." Mercy took the paper, their fingers brushing momentarily. "Safe travels, Yates." He tipped his hat once more, allowing himself one last look at mother and child before turning to leave. At the doorway he paused, Mercy. Yes. I'll see you in 3 weeks. It wasn't a question, but a promise. Her smile was like sunrise after a long, dark night. We'll be waiting. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity for Mercy as she established herself in Timberlake. The town council had enthusiastically confirmed her appointment as schoolteacher, offering a modest but livable salary plus accommodation. The townswomen, led by the indefatigable Beatrice Pierce, had transformed the small room behind the schoolhouse into a cozy living space, complete with a new mattress, curtains for the window, and even a handmade quilt for William's cradle. School began the Monday after her arrival, with 27 students ranging from 5 to 16 years of age. Their educational levels varied wildly. Some could barely recognize letters, while others had been well taught before their families moved west. Mercy thrived on the challenge, dividing the children into groups based on ability rather than age, and developing a curriculum that would address each group's needs. To her relief, not a single parent commented on William's unusual eyes. If they noticed, and surely they must have, they kept their observations to themselves. The children, naturally curious, asked about his special eyes directly, and Mercy explained the condition as a natural variation, like hair color or height. Their simple acceptance warmed her heart. Reverend Wilson proved to be exactly as Yates had described: kind, practical, and more concerned with actions than appearances. He welcomed Mercy to his small congregation without reservation and offered her access to his personal library for teaching materials. Education is God's work too, he told her after her first Sunday service. These children deserve the best we can give them. As the days passed, Mercy found herself thinking often of Yates. She would catch herself glancing at the calendar, counting the days until his scheduled return. It was foolish. She knew she had met the man only briefly, and her life was complicated enough without developing feelings for a deputy marshal whose duty kept him constantly on the move. Yet she couldn't deny the connection she had felt, or the way her heart quickened at the memory of his gentle hands cradling William, his quiet strength during their journey to Timberlake. "You've got it bad," observed Mrs. Holbrook one afternoon when Mercy stopped by the boarding house to deliver some eggs from the Pierce's hens. The shrewd widow had noticed Mercy glancing at the staircase that led to the rooms, including the one Yates sometimes occupied. "I don't know what you mean," Mercy protested, feeling heat rise to her cheeks. "Of course you don't," Mrs. Holbrook replied with a knowing smile. "But when the deputy does come back through town, you might want to make sure you're wearing something prettier than that schoolmarm getup." Despite her embarrassment, Mercy took the advice to heart. The day Yates was due to return, she found herself taking extra care with her appearance, pinning her hair in a softer style and wearing a dress that Beatrice had helped her make, a simple but flattering garment in a warm russet color that complemented her chestnut hair. The school day seemed interminable, with Mercy constantly glancing toward the window. By the time she dismissed the children, her nerves were stretched thin with anticipation. Would he come? Had she built up their brief connection into something it wasn't? She was arranging books on her desk, William cooing in his basket nearby, when a shadow fell across the doorway. Looking up, her heart leaped at the familiar silhouette. "Deputy Vaughn," she greeted him, striving for a casual tone despite the flutter in her chest. He stepped into the schoolroom, removing his hat. "Mrs. Sinclair, hope I'm not interrupting." "Not at all. We've just finished for the day." She gestured to the empty desks. "Though, as you can see, my students have already escaped." A smile tugged at his lips, softening the weathered lines of his face. "Can't blame them. Fine day outside." Yates approached the basket where William lay, his expression warming as he gazed down at the infant. "He's grown." "Babies do that," Mercy replied, smiling. "He's been eating well and sleeping through most nights now. And you? How are you settling in?" "Better than I could have hoped. Everyone has been so welcoming." She hesitated, then added, "I've thought about you often, wondering how your patrols were going." Something flickered in his eyes, pleasure, perhaps, or surprise at her candor. "Been thinking about you too. Both of you." He cleared his throat. "Brought something for the boy." From his saddlebag, he produced a small wooden horse, simply but skillfully carved. "Made it during evenings on the trail. Not much else to do once camp's set." Mercy took the toy, touched by the gesture. The carving was surprisingly detailed, with a flowing mane and tail and delicate features. "It's beautiful. Thank you." "He won't appreciate it for a while yet, I suppose." "But I do," she said softly. "Very much." Their eyes met, and for a moment, the schoolroom seemed to fade away, leaving only the two of them in a bubble of shared understanding. Then William gurgled loudly, breaking the spell. Yates chuckled. "Demanding attention already. Going to be a handful when he starts walking." "Don't remind me," Mercy groaned, though her eyes sparkled with maternal pride. "I'm already dreading chasing him around the schoolroom while trying to teach. The town council mentioned hiring an assistant for you once the spring taxes are collected. Someone to help with the younger children and mind William during school hours." "You've spoken to the council?" Mercy was surprised and oddly pleased that he had taken an interest in her situation beyond their initial meeting. "Just checking in," he said with a casual shrug that didn't quite disguise his concern. "Making sure promises were kept." A comfortable silence fell between them, neither quite ready to part ways yet neither sure how to proceed. Finally, Yates gestured to the door. "I was wondering if you might like to take a walk. Weather's fine, and you've probably been cooped up with the children all day." "I'd like that very much," Mercy replied, perhaps too quickly. She gathered William and the few items she needed to take home, then joined Yates outside in the golden afternoon light. They walked through Timberlake at a leisurely pace, Yates shortening his stride to match hers. He pointed out changes since her arrival: new construction at the edge of town, improvements to the livery stable, plans for a proper church building instead of the converted storefront currently used for services. People greeted them as they passed, many stopping to admire William or ask Mercy about their children's progress in school. Yates noticed the easy way she interacted with the townsfolk, how quickly she had become a valued part of the community. Pride swelled in his chest, though he had no right to it. "You belong here," he observed as they left the main street behind, following a path that led to a small creek on the outskirts of town. "They respect you." "It's been a blessing," Mercy admitted. "After Cherry Creek, I wasn't sure I'd ever find a place where William and I could be accepted." They reached the creek, where a fallen log provided a natural bench overlooking the water. Mercy sat, adjusting William in her arms, and after a moment's hesitation, Yates joined her, leaving a respectable distance between them. "How long will you stay this time?" she asked, watching a pair of ducks glide across the water's surface. "Just overnight. Got reports of cattle rustling near the territorial border. Need to investigate." "Is it dangerous?" The question slipped out before she could stop it, revealing more concern than might be proper. Yates smiled slightly. "Most of my work is more tedious than dangerous. Lot of riding, lot of talking to people. Occasional drunk cowboy to deal with. But sometimes it's more than that." He nodded, acknowledging the truth. "Sometimes. Nature of the job." Mercy looked down at William, who had dozed off in the peaceful setting. "When Daniel died, I promised myself I'd never care for a man with a dangerous profession again. The waiting, the worry. It's too much." The implication of her words hung between them that she did care for Yates, despite her best intentions. He said nothing for a long moment, watching the play of light on the water. "I understand," he finally replied. "A deputy marshal's life isn't suited for family. Always moving, never knowing what's waiting around the next bend. Yet you chose it. Seemed right at the time. After the war, couldn't settle in one place. Too restless. He glanced at her. But lately I've been thinking there might be other paths. Hope flickered in Mercy's heart, but she tamped it down. It was too soon, too uncertain. They barely knew each other, and yet there was something between them, something that had been there from the moment he found her collapsed on the trail with her newborn son. "Tell me about the war," she said, changing the subject to safer ground. "If you don't mind speaking of it." Yates rarely discussed his experiences in the conflict that had torn the nation apart, but found himself sharing with Mercy things he had told few others: the fear and confusion of battle, the bonds formed with fellow soldiers, the disillusionment that followed the Union's victory when he returned to a home that no longer felt like home. "My father died while I was away. Farm was sold to pay debts. Sisters married and scattered. Nothing to keep me in Missouri." He stared at his hands, strong hands that had known both violence and tenderness. Drifted west, worked as sheriff's deputy in a mining town, then got the marshal's badge 3 years ago. "And you've been patrolling ever since," Mercy said softly. "Always moving. Until now." He looked at her directly, something new in his gaze. "Until you." The simple declaration hung in the air between them, honest and unadorned. Mercy's breath caught in her throat, emotions warring within her: hope, fear, desire for something she had never truly experienced even in her marriage to Daniel. "Yates, you don't need to say anything," he interrupted gently. "Just wanted you to know that meeting you and William has made me question things I thought were settled." William stirred in her arms, saving her from having to formulate a response. The baby's eyes opened, those remarkable mismatched orbs focusing on Yates with what seemed like recognition. "Hello there, young man," Yates said, his voice softening as it always did when addressing the infant. "Remember me?" To Mercy's surprise and delight, William's face broke into a toothless smile. "He does remember you," she laughed. "That's his first real smile. Is it now?" Yates looked inordinately pleased. "Well, that's quite an honor." The tension of the moment eased, replaced by shared joy in this small milestone. As the afternoon light began to fade, they walked back to town, talking now of simpler things: the progress of Mercy's students, the changes to Timberlake since Yates's last visit, William's growing personality. At the door to her quarters behind the schoolhouse, they paused. "Would you join us for supper?" Mercy asked impulsively. "Nothing fancy, but I've become quite proficient with my little cook stove." Yates hesitated, visibly torn. "I should report to the local constable, and I've already arranged for a room at Mrs. Holbrook's." "Of course," Mercy said quickly, hiding her disappointment. "Another time, perhaps. But," he continued, "I'd be honored to dine with you before I leave tomorrow if the invitation stands." Her smile returned. "It does. Noon, after morning lessons." "Noon it is." He touched the brim of his hat in a gesture that was becoming sweetly familiar. "Good night, Mercy." "William." As she watched him walk away, Mercy hugged her son closer, wondering at the path her life had taken. A month ago, she had been fleeing in terror, certain that she and her child were doomed. Now she had a home, a purpose, a community that accepted them, and perhaps, just perhaps, the beginning of something precious with a man who saw only innocence where others had seen aberration. "What do you think, William?" she whispered to her drowsy son. "Should we let the deputy into our lives?" The baby's mismatched eyes gazed up at her, and Mercy fancied she saw wisdom beyond his weeks in that unique gaze. Then he yawned widely, clearly untroubled by the complexities of adult relationships. Mercy laughed softly. "You're right. One day at a time." Inside her small quarters, she placed William in his cradle and moved to the window, watching Yates's tall figure disappear down the darkening street. Tomorrow he would be gone again, back to his duties and his solitary life on the trail. But he would return, of that she was certain. And next time, perhaps they would both be ready to acknowledge what was growing between them. For now, it was enough to know that in a world that had once rejected her son for the color of his eyes, there was at least one man who saw only the beauty and possibility in being different. When Yates returned to Timberlake 3 weeks later, he brought news that would change everything. "Cherry Creek knows you're here," he told Mercy without preamble as they walked along the creek that had become their special meeting place. William, now nearly 3 months old and increasingly alert, was strapped to Mercy's chest in a sling fashioned from a soft blanket. "What?" Mercy stopped abruptly, her face paling. "How?" Trader passed through both towns. Mentioned the new schoolteacher in Timberlake with the baby who has different colored eyes. Word got back to Reverend Holloway. Yates's expression was grim. "He's been telling people it's his Christian duty to save the child from a mother in league with dark forces. But that's absurd," Mercy protested, instinctively clutching William closer. "Surely no one believes such nonsense." "Some do. Enough to form a committee of concerned citizens. They're planning to petition the territorial governor to investigate." Yates took her elbow, guiding her to their usual log seat. "I don't think they have any legal grounds, but they could make trouble. Spread rumors that might follow you even here." Mercy sat heavily, her mind racing. Just when she had begun to feel safe, to build a new life for herself and William, the shadows of the past were reaching out to engulf them again. "What should I do?" she asked, hating the tremor in her voice. Yates paced before her, his usual composure replaced by barely contained energy. "I've been thinking about this since I heard. There are options." He stopped, facing her directly. "You could move again. Further west, maybe Oregon or California. Plenty of towns need teachers." "Run again," Mercy said flatly. "Start over. Again. Or," Yates continued, his voice changing subtly, "there's another way to protect you and William, a more permanent solution." Something in his tone made Mercy look up sharply. "What do you mean?" Yates removed his hat, running a hand through his hair in an uncharacteristically nervous gesture. "A married woman with a respected husband would be less vulnerable to these kinds of accusations, especially if that husband had some standing with law enforcement." Mercy stared at him, hardly daring to believe what she was hearing. "Are you suggesting—" "Marriage," Yates confirmed, his eyes never leaving hers. "To me." The world seemed to still around them, the creek's gentle babbling fading to background noise as Mercy processed his words. "Yates, I don't know what to say." "I know it's sudden," he acknowledged, sitting beside her on the log. "And maybe not the proposal a woman dreams of. But I care for you, Mercy, more than I thought possible after knowing someone such a short time." And William, his voice softened, "I already think of him as, well, I'd be proud to call him my son." Tears pricked at Mercy's eyes. "You would marry me to protect us from Cherry Creek." "That's part of it," he admitted. "But only part. The truth is, I've been thinking about settling down. Requested a transfer to the marshal's office in Denver. It would mean a more permanent position, less traveling. I could be based here in Timberlake, make the ride to Denver when necessary. You would give up your patrol routes? Your freedom." "Freedom's a funny thing," Yates said thoughtfully. "These past months, riding between assignments, all I could think about was getting back here. To you. That doesn't feel like freedom to me, it feels like being torn in two." William squirmed in his sling, and Yates reached out instinctively to soothe him, his large hand gentle against the baby's back. The simple gesture spoke volumes about the connection he had formed with the child. "I won't pretend it would be easy," he continued. I'm set in my ways, and you've only just started rebuilding your life here. But I think we could make a good team, you and I. And William deserves a father who sees him for the blessing he is." Mercy's heart was racing, emotions colliding within her. She had grown to care deeply for Yates over his repeated visits, cherishing their conversations and the way he interacted with William. But marriage? So soon after her widowhood, to a man she was still getting to know? "This isn't just about protection," she said slowly. "I need to be certain of that." "It's not," Yates assured her, "though I won't deny that played a part in my timing." He took her free hand in his touch warm and steady. "Mercy Sinclair, I believe I'm falling in love with you, both of you, and while I can't promise to be perfect, I can promise to be loyal, to respect you as an equal partner, and to love this boy as my own." A tear slipped down Mercy's cheek. "My marriage to Daniel was one of convenience and mutual respect. There was affection, but never what poets call love." "And is that what you want?" Yates asked softly. "A poet's love?" Mercy looked down at William, then back at the man beside her, this steady, honorable man who had risked his reputation to help a desperate woman and her devil-marked child, who had carved toys for a baby not his own, who was offering to change his entire life to protect them. "I think," she said finally, "I want a love that's real, not flowery words, but actions, commitment, partnership." She squeezed his hand. "The kind of love you've already begun to show us." Hope dawned in Yates's eyes. "Is that a yes?" "It's a I need time to think," Mercy replied honestly. "This is too important to rush, for all our sakes." Yates nodded, accepting her caution. "Of course. Take all the time you need." He rose, retrieving his hat. "I'll be in town for 2 days before I need to report to Fort Collins. Whatever you decide, I'll respect it." As they walked back toward town, side by side but each lost in thought, Mercy couldn't help wondering if this unexpected proposal was the answer to her prayers or simply trading one form of dependence for another. She had worked so hard to establish herself in Timberlake, to prove she could support herself and William without a man's protection. Would marrying Yates undermine all she had accomplished? Yet the threat from Cherry Creek was real. And more importantly, the feelings growing between them were real, too tentative and new, but with a solid foundation of mutual respect and shared values. Perhaps that was a better basis for marriage than many couples had. That evening, as she put William to bed in his cradle, Mercy found herself studying her son's unique eyes with renewed appreciation. Those eyes, one blue, one amber, had brought them persecution, but they had also led them to Yates. Without the cruelty of Cherry Creek, would their paths ever have crossed? "What do you think, little one?" she whispered. "Should we accept the deputy's proposal?" William blinked up at her sleepily, his mismatched eyes somehow wise beyond his months. Then he yawned and drifted off to sleep, leaving Mercy no closer to a decision. She slept fitfully that night, dreams filled with shadowy figures from Cherry Creek pursuing her through endless prairies. In one particularly vivid sequence, Yates appeared on horseback, reaching down to pull her and William to safety only to disappear in a cloud of dust as she tried to thank him. She awoke at dawn, her mind clearer than it had been in days. The dream had revealed what her conscious mind had been reluctant to acknowledge. The thought of losing Yates's presence in their lives was more painful than any concern about independence or hasty decisions. After breakfast, she left William with Mrs. Pierce, who had become a doting surrogate grandmother, and sought out Yates at Mrs. Holbrook's boarding house. The older woman gave Mercy a knowing look as she directed her to the small parlor where Yates was having his morning coffee. He rose when she entered, surprise and hope warring in his expression. "Mercy, good morning." "I couldn't wait any longer," she said without preamble. "I've made my decision." Yates set down his coffee cup, his hands not quite steady. And, before I tell you, I need to be absolutely clear about something. Mercy took a deep breath. I won't be a burden to be protected or a responsibility you've taken on out of duty. If we do this, we do it as equals. I wouldn't want it any other way, Yates replied, a slow smile beginning to form. I'll keep teaching, she continued. That's important to me. Of course. And William is part of the package. Always and forever. Yates's smile broadened. I'm counting on it. Mercy felt her own lips curving in response. Then yes, Deputy Vaughn. I will marry you. The distance between them vanished as Yates crossed the room in 2 strides, gathering her in his arms with a gentleness that belied his strength. You won't regret it, he murmured against her hair. I promise you that. I know, she said simply, and realized it was true. Whatever challenges lay ahead, they would face them together, a family forged not by blood, but by choice and circumstance and the beginning of love. They were married 2 days later in Reverend Wilson's front parlor, with the Pierces as witnesses and William cooing in Beatrice's arms. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt, with traditional vows spoken in voices that grew stronger with each promise exchanged. I now pronounce you husband and wife, the Reverend declared, beaming at the couple. Deputy Vaughn, you may kiss your bride. Yates cupped Mercy's face in his hands with exquisite tenderness, as if she were made of the finest porcelain. The kiss was brief but profound, a seal on their unconventional courtship and a promise of the life they would build together. Afterward, there was a small celebration at the Pierces' home, with a cake Beatrice had somehow managed to prepare on short notice and a bottle of fine whiskey the mayor produced from his special occasion cabinet. The school children, upon hearing that their teacher had married the deputy marshal, spontaneously gathered outside to serenade them with off-key renditions of popular songs, much to everyone's amusement. That night, in the newly expanded quarters behind the schoolhouse, a wedding gift from the town council, who had hastily arranged for the adjacent storeroom to be converted into a proper bedroom, Mercy and Yates faced the moment they had both anticipated and perhaps feared, the transition from friendship to marriage in its fullest sense. We can wait, Yates offered as he helped her remove the pins from her hair, watching the chestnut waves cascade down her back. There's no rush. Mercy turned to face him, summoning courage she hadn't known she possessed. I don't want to wait, she said softly. You're my husband now, in all ways. Their coming together was tender and unhurried, both discovering each other's bodies with wonder and growing passion. For Mercy, who had known only Daniel's dutiful attentions, Yates's ardent yet gentle lovemaking was a revelation and awakening to pleasures she had scarcely imagined possible. Afterward, lying in his arms with her head pillowed on his chest, Mercy marveled at how quickly life could change. 2 months ago, she had been fleeing for her life. Now she was a respected teacher and the wife of a man who cherished both her and her child. What are you thinking? Yates asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. That happiness can come from the most unexpected places, she replied honestly. If someone had told me when I was running from Cherry Creek that being cast out would lead to this, I would never have believed them. Yates pressed a kiss to her forehead. Sometimes the worst moments in our lives lead us to where we're meant to be. From the corner of the room came a small whimper as William stirred in his cradle. Yates released Mercy with a smile. Sounds like someone wants to join the conversation. Wrapping herself in a light robe, Mercy retrieved the baby and brought him back to the bed. Yates sat up, reaching for the infant with practiced ease that still surprised and delighted her. Hello, son, he said, the word rolling off his tongue as if he had been saying it all his life. What do you think of our new arrangements? William gazed up at him with those extraordinary eyes, then made a sound suspiciously like a giggle. Mercy laughed. I think that's approval. Smart boy, Yates replied, gently bouncing the baby on his knee. Takes after his mother. The simple domesticity of the moment brought tears to Mercy's eyes, happy tears. For once. This was what she had always wanted but never quite found with Daniel. Not just a husband, but a partner. Not just a father for her child, but a man who would love that child as fiercely as she did. What happens now? She asked, leaning against Yates's side as they both watched William's antics. With Cherry Creek, Yates's expression grew serious. I've sent official word to the territorial marshal that allegations against you are baseless and motivated by superstition. As an officer of the law, my testimony carries weight. His arm tightened around her shoulders. And as your husband, I have legal standing to prevent any attempt to separate you from William. And your transfer to Denver? Approved, he confirmed. I'll need to travel there once a month for assignments and reports, but Timberlake will be our home base. Our home, Mercy repeated, savoring the words. After so much upheaval, the promise of permanence was almost too precious to believe. We could look for a proper house, Yates suggested. These quarters are fine for now, but with time. With time, Mercy agreed, though in truth she was content with their current arrangement. The schoolhouse living quarters, while modest, were clean and comfortable, and there was something fitting about living where she taught, about William growing up surrounded by books and learning. William yawned widely, his eyelids drooping despite his obvious desire to remain part of the adult conversation. Mercy took him back into her arms, humming softly until he drifted off to sleep. You're a natural at this, Yates observed quietly. Motherhood, teaching you were born for it. And you, she replied, placing the sleeping infant back in his cradle, are a natural at fatherhood, despite your claims of being set in your ways. When she returned to bed, Yates drew her close once more, his kiss deeper now, rekindling the embers of desire they had only recently discovered together. I may be set in my ways, he murmured against her lips, but I'm finding that some changes are very much worth making. As autumn gave way to winter, the Vaughn family settled into a rhythm that suited them all. Mercy continued teaching, her students thriving under her guidance. Yates established a small office in town, handling local legal matters when not required in Denver, and gradually earning the respect and trust of Timberlake's residents. William grew stronger daily, his personality emerging as a delightful blend of curiosity and good humor. The threat from Cherry Creek faded as legal channels proved fruitless. Reverend Holloway's petition to the territorial governor was politely but firmly dismissed, with a pointed suggestion that frontier communities might better focus their energies on education and development rather than pursuing spurious claims of supernatural influence. As Christmas approached, bringing with it the first heavy snows, Mercy found herself reflecting on the extraordinary year that was ending. 12 months ago, she had been a pregnant widow, respected but alone. Now she was a wife again, a mother, a valued teacher, and a woman who had discovered her own strength through adversity. One evening, as they sat before the fire in their cozy quarters, William asleep in his cradle nearby, Yates presented her with a small, carefully wrapped package. It's not Christmas yet, Mercy protested, though her fingers were already working at the string. Consider it an early gift, Yates replied, watching her with anticipation. Inside the wrapping was a velvet box, and within that, a gold locket on a delicate chain. Mercy opened it to find a tiny portrait of William on one side, his mismatched eyes captured with remarkable accuracy by a talented artist. It's beautiful, she breathed, tears welling. But how? When? Remember when Mrs. Pierce insisted on watching William for a whole afternoon last month? I took one of your sketches of him to a portraitist in Denver during my last trip. Yates helped her fasten the chain around her neck. I wanted you to have something to keep him close to your heart always, even when he's grown. His eyes, Mercy said softly, touching the locket. They're perfect. They are perfect, Yates agreed. Just as he is. Just as you are. Mercy leaned into his embrace, overwhelmed with gratitude for this man who had seen beauty where others saw only strangeness, who had offered protection without demanding submission, who had become not just a husband but a true partner in all things. I love you, she whispered, the words coming easily now after months of growing certainty. I love you, Yates Vaughn. His arms tightened around her. And I love you, Mercy Vaughn. You and William both, more than I ever thought possible. Outside, snow fell silently over Timberlake, blanketing the small frontier town in pristine white. Inside their warm home, a family born of chance and choice and courage faced the future together, secure in the knowledge that they had found in each other exactly what they needed: acceptance, respect, and a love strong enough to overcome any prejudice. And if anyone in their new community ever wondered about the unusual eyes of the deputy marshal's adopted son, they need only look at the way Yates gazed at the boy with pride, with tenderness, and with the unwavering conviction that he saw in those mismatched orbs only innocence and unlimited potential. As the years passed, Timberlake grew from a settlement into a proper town, with Mercy and Yates at the heart of its development. The school expanded to 2 rooms, then 3, with Mercy eventually becoming headmistress over a staff of 4 teachers. Yates's position with the marshal's office evolved into a more administrative role, allowing him to be home most evenings and to actively participate in town governance. William thrived under their joint care, growing into a sturdy, intelligent boy with his mother's compassion and his adoptive father's sense of justice. His unusual eyes, once the cause of such fear and rejection, became simply another of his distinguishing features, like his ready laugh or his talent for mathematics. If occasionally a visitor to town stared too long or whispered behind a hand, William learned to meet their gaze directly, his mismatched eyes challenging them to see beyond the superficial. When William was 4, Mercy gave birth to a daughter they named Elizabeth, a robust child with her father's blue eyes and her mother's chestnut hair. William took to big brotherhood with characteristic enthusiasm, proudly introducing his sister to anyone who would listen as the newest Vaughn. One crisp autumn day, when William was 7 and Elizabeth 3, the family made a rare journey to Cherry Creek. Yates had business there, and Mercy had finally decided it was time to face the town that had cast her out. Are you sure about this? Yates asked as their wagon approached the outskirts. You don't have to do this. I do, Mercy replied firmly, though her hand sought his for reassurance. For William's sake, and my own. Cherry Creek had changed little in the intervening years, though the faces on the street were often unfamiliar. A few people recognized Mercy, their expressions ranging from embarrassment to lingering suspicion. But many simply nodded politely to the well-dressed family, assuming them to be visitors passing through. They stopped first at the small cemetery on the edge of town, where Daniel Sinclair's grave lay among others lost to mining accidents and frontier hardships. Mercy laid flowers on the simple marker, murmuring a quiet prayer of thanks for the decent, if unexceptional, man who had given her his name and, indirectly, her son. Was he nice? William asked solemnly, standing beside his mother with his hand in hers. He was kind, Mercy answered truthfully, and he would have loved you very much. Not as much as Pa does, William stated with a child's certainty, glancing up at Yates. Different, not more or less, Mercy corrected gently. There are many kinds of love in this world, William. You're fortunate to have known more than one. From the cemetery, they continued into town proper, Elizabeth now asleep in Yates's arms while William walked between his parents, his distinctive eyes taking in everything with curious intelligence. They had nearly reached the general store when a tall, thin figure in black emerged from a nearby building. Reverend Holloway had aged visibly, his once black hair now streaked with gray, his face more lined than Mercy remembered. He stopped abruptly at the sight of them, recognition dawning in his narrow eyes. "Mrs. Sinclair," he said, his voice exactly as Mercy recalled, precise and slightly nasal. "Or I suppose it's Mrs. Vaughn now." "Reverend," Mercy acknowledged with a composure that surprised even her. "Yes, I've been Mrs. Vaughn for some years." Holloway's gaze dropped to William, who returned his scrutiny without flinching. "So this is the child." "This is our son," Yates corrected, his tone courteous but with an edge of steel beneath. "William Vaughn." The Reverend's lips thinned. "I see the condition remains." "If you mean his eyes, then yes," Mercy replied calmly. "God made him exactly as he intended. A convenient interpretation. A loving one," Mercy countered, "and one shared by every decent person who has come to know him." Holloway seemed about to respond when Elizabeth stirred in Yates's arms, blinking sleepily at the stranger. The sight of the clearly normal-eyed child appeared to confuse the Reverend, undermining whatever point he had been prepared to make about divine punishment or generational sins. "We should continue with our business," Yates said, effectively ending the conversation. "Good day, Reverend." As they walked away, William tugged at Mercy's sleeve. "Was that the man who said I was bad?" Mercy crouched to her son's level, looking directly into his unique eyes, one as blue as a summer sky, the other the warm amber of autumn leaves. "He was afraid of what he didn't understand," she explained. "Some people are like that. They see differences and think they're wrong when really they're just different. Like my eyes. Exactly like your eyes." She brushed his dark hair from his forehead. "Do you remember what Pa always says about your eyes?" William nodded solemnly. "That they help me see things from different perspectives." "That's right." She straightened up, taking his hand again. "And that makes you special, not wrong." As they continued down the street, Mercy felt a weight lifting from her shoulders, a burden of fear and rejection she hadn't realized she still carried. Cherry Creek held no power over them anymore. The town that had cast them out had become just another place, its judgment irrelevant to the life they had built elsewhere. Later that evening, settled in rooms at the town's small hotel, Mercy sat by the window watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Yates joined her after tucking the children into bed, his hand warm on her shoulder. "You were magnificent today," he said quietly. "Facing him like that." "It was easier than I expected," Mercy admitted. "Perhaps because I'm no longer that frightened woman running for her life. Or perhaps because I know now what truly matters." "And what's that?" Yates asked, though the look in his eyes suggested he already knew the answer. "Family. Purpose. Love." She turned to face him fully. "Everything I found because they cast me out." Yates drew her to her feet and into his arms. "Their loss," he murmured. "Our gain." As the last light faded from the sky, Mercy Vaughn stood in the embrace of the man who had seen innocence where others saw only strangeness, the man who had become her partner, her protector, and the father her son deserved. Beyond the window lay Cherry Creek, a town trapped in fear and superstition. But within this room, within their family, there was only acceptance, understanding, and a love that had transformed four separate lives into one indivisible whole. "Ready to go home tomorrow?" Yates asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. "More than ready," Mercy replied with absolute certainty. "Timberlake is where we belong. Home." The word had never held such meaning, not a place defined by walls and a roof, but a space created by hearts joined in mutual respect and enduring love. A sanctuary where a child with mismatched eyes could grow up knowing that what made him different also made him special. And in that knowledge, Mercy found the perfect completion of the journey that had begun in terror but ended in triumph, not just survival, but a life rich with purpose, joy, and the abiding certainty that sometimes being cast out is simply the first step toward finding where you truly belong.